This is part 8 of the Craftsman King Seeley 100 Drill Press Rebuild Series. If you haven't seen part 7, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we're going to be assembling the motor. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. First thing I'm going to be doing is cleaning the stator with this CRC electrical contact cleaner. You can get this stuff at most of your big box stores, so I just spray it down. It dries pretty fast, so once you spray it, hit it with a toothbrush, and just be careful not to break any of the windings on the stator. And we can use this same stuff on all of the electrical components. So here we have the switch, and just spraying it down. Comes out pretty forcefully, so it kind of does the job of blowing stuff away as well as cleaning it at the same time. And this is the clicks-on overload protector switch. And you can clean that up a little bit further with that Meguiar's plastic polish if you need to. And this is the on-off switch for the motor. I'm just going to use some Q-tips to get down in there. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the 2 wires that are coming off of the capacitor. We had cut those wires, so we're going to remove them and install 2 new wires with terminal connectors on them. So I'm just using a soldering iron to reheat the solder and remove that. And here we have one of the leads, and we'll just insert it back in that same hole and then apply new solder to it. And then we'll do the same thing for the other side. And then we're just going to install some terminals on various wires. This is one of the wires coming off the clicks-on. I like using the blade terminal connectors. So that's what I use throughout the entire process. Next, I'm going to cut the power cord. I've already pre-measured it. So this is all we need because it's going to plug into that power panel that I'll finish fabricating in the next video. We're just going to cut off the shielding and then strip the wires out of it. About 6 inches down. And my memory card filled up and I didn't realize it, so I apologize for that. What you missed was me installing the terminal end on the stator and connecting all of the wires that go on the inside of that terminal end to include the clicks-on, the terminal bar, and all of that. It is what it is. So here we're installing the governor centrifugal switch assembly on the rotor. So if you recall from disassembly, there was a white paper ring, and that has already been slid down the shaft on the rotor. And I've just attached the plastic part to the spring, and now I'm attaching that weird cup washer on the end of that spring. And then we can slide that whole assembly down onto the shaft. Next, we've got the two wings or governors that fly out. So we're just going to install those, and if we have to, we'll bend the mounts out a little bit further. Now, when you install it, it's kind of got a T shape facing towards the shaft, and that T part needs to be encapsulated in the plastic part, like I have it now. And then we just bend that frame or the mounts back in place. Make sure it moves freely, and then do the other side the exact same way. So now that plastic piece is being held down by those T ends on each one of those wings or governors. So then we have two springs that hook on the outside of those governors or wings, whatever you want to call them. I'm just hitting them with some super slick stuff to make sure they're lubricated well. We just hook one end and then stretch it and hook the other end. I've tried using small needle nose and picks and everything else, but really just using your fingers to get it hooked on the other end is really the best way to do it. So that's one of them installed. And then we'll install this side. And I've had these springs break on me before, or they were broken when I disassembled the motor. So if you can at least have one spring, you can measure it, count the number of coils in it and all that kind of stuff, and then you can order replacement springs from MakeMaster Car. So now we're just going to install the rotor inside the stator. And I've already installed the air cone in that end frame. So we'll just slide that on there and then get it to line up. And so I'm using, these are Norma ball bearings. They're brand new. And if you recall, on this ball bearing, it has one side has the inner race protruding, and the outside was open on the original ball bearing. So on these ball bearings, the outside has metal shielding, and the inside has a rubber seal. But the big thing to know is that the side that has the protruding inner race needs to face towards the inside of the motor. And once I've got that first bearing in there, I'm going to go ahead and install the 4 long screws on the motor. And this will help to keep it all together. I'm not going to tighten them down. I'm just going to hand tighten them right now. So once we've got all 4 of those in, then we can install the other ball bearing on the terminal side. So again, the side that has the rubber seal and the protruding inner race goes towards the inside of the motor. There's actually a stop for this bearing on this end, where you cannot push this bearing in any further. There's a small lip inside the bore that this bearing rides in, that the bearing will rest on. So we're just going to tap it down until it seats itself. And if you didn't pick it up, the piece of PVC pipe that I'm using would be smacking directly on top of that shield or seal if I wasn't using that washer. That's what the washer is there for, to keep me from messing up the shield or the seal on the bearing. So now we've stood it up, and we're just going to tap the rotor back down into the motor, and then seat that bearing again. And this bearing can go much further down, and there's play built in there so that the rotor can center itself, and that's why we have that spring washer that I just put on there. And then we've got the paper gasket, and then the bearing cover. Then we've got the felt. And I took these felt rings and soaked them in 5W30. So and then I dried them off with a rag. And then we've got the felt cover. So you really don't have to reinstall that felt since we're not dealing with an open bearing anymore. But I do it anyways. Helps seal up that bearing area better. And as long as the felt is lubricated with some oil, it should help in cutting down on the bearing noise, which would cut down on the motor noise. So we've got the 4 screws that hold all that together. We're just going to hand tighten them, and then we'll tighten them down with a screwdriver. And there's a little bit of play here for each one of these pieces. So lining them up as best you can by eye, and then tightening it down like you would a tire, using a cross pattern, going from like this screw to the one across from it, and then the next screw, and then the one across from it. That helps keep that all centered. But if you're doing this and you're getting a lot of noise when you first start the motor, you can come back and loosen up these 4 screws on each end and then retighten them. And you've probably got one of those pieces of metal there riding against the rotor shaft. So as long as they're not actually touching the rotor shaft, they shouldn't make a whole lot of noise at all. And we're just going to flip the motor over, and then we're going to do the exact same thing on this end, except this end does not get the spring washer. So the spring washer goes on the other end, not the terminal end. So here I'm just reseating that bearing. It actually hadn't moved, but I was just making sure. And we've got the paper gasket. And then the bearing cover. You can see how those holes are elongated. They're not like perfectly round. And that's so that that piece can shift a little bit in all four directions. And then we've got the felt. So I forgot it. There it is. So I've actually got it sitting inside a little cup of that oil right now. So I'm going to pull it out of that oil and then dry it off with a paper towel. And then we can throw it on there. And then the felt cover. And then the 4 screws. And while we're doing this, I'm going to go ahead and apologize early that my battery died in addition to the memory card issue. So there's a couple of steps when we get towards the end that didn't get recorded either. And I apologize for that. But if you saw the disassembly video, reassembling the motor is not a difficult thing. So now we'll just tighten all those down, same style as we did before, using the cross pattern. And then we've got the terminal cover. And again, I apologize for not showing the installation of all the internals there, but I don't review a lot of these videos until days or weeks after I've already done this stuff. So it's the same motor that I use on the 150 video. So you can go look at that motor assembly as well if you're confused about it, but it's pretty simple. So the next thing we need to do is install the motor panel on the stator band. And as you can see, that stator band cleaned up real nice. I mean, all I did was soak it in simple green, and then I soaked it in citric acid. So I didn't polish it or anything. That's how it looks after it came out of the citric acid. So I sprayed it down with some of the super slick stuff, penetrating oil, and wiped it off. So the way I'm going to attach this motor panel are these eyelets. I think they're 1/8 of an inch or 3/16 of an inch. I don't remember exactly. And the eyelets came with a die. So I've got that die sitting on the bottom, and then the setter. And you just use a hammer. And boom, that's one down. So I do that for all 4 of the holes, but the other end, because the stator band is round, those little legs coming off of it kept getting in the way, so I'm using a wooden board here just to hold it open while I set these. And there we go. Nice factory look. Good to go. So installing the stator, Just make sure you have the motor data panel on the correct side of the motor when you do this, otherwise it'll be upside down. And then there's actually a little lip that the stator band rides in. And then you just need to get it centered on the motor. And if you have to, just bend out those tabs a little bit. And then work it around the motor and close it up, and then you can connect those tabs. There's one. And there's the other. Now we've got the base. So one side of that base, well, both sides of the base have holes in them. One is for the power cord and one is for the switch. The switch side it's on a shelf, basically. So once we're sure that stator band is lined up where we need it with the base, then we can go ahead and bend down where the stator band connects. And then we can install that base. So the base has two screws that attach directly to the stator. And the screw on the far side there is next to where the switch will be. And the side closest to us is the side that the power cord is going to go into. So I'm installing a grommet in that hole. And then we'll insert the power cord through the grommet. And as you can see, I'm wiring this motor to be grounded. So we're going to take that ground wire, which is the green wire, and we're going to put an I terminal or a circle terminal or whatever you want to call that kind of terminal that's got a round loop on it. But before we do that, we need to put a hog ring on the power cord. And this acts as a stress relief for the cable so that you can't pull the cable out of the motor base. This is actually how they did all the stress reliefs on pretty much all of these classic Craftsman tools, with just one of these hog rings. Apparently my dexterity went to absolute crap, but finally got it. Make sure it's on there good. Then we'll check it to make sure the power cord does not pull through the grommet. So we're good to go. So now we're just going to eyeball measure. And we're going to be cutting that ground wire just a little bit and then putting that loop terminal on it. And then that loop terminal is large enough that the screw that screws the base to the stator will fit through the terminal. And that's how we're going to ground the motor. I don't know, maybe I should consider getting an additional camera that's looking straight down so that you could see this better, but I've only got one camera right now, so once we've got that on there, we can go ahead and crimp it on. And this is a heat shrink terminal, so we can hit that with the heat gun and shrink it to the cord. And we'll just go ahead and put that last screw through the terminal. And then we're going to have to pull that power cord through a little bit more to have some room to work. And we can bend it out of the way. There you go. So once we've got that hand tight, then we can go ahead and use a socket on it and ratchet that sucker down. And then do the same with the other side. So here I'm just stripping the black and white wires that are coming out of the power cable, and they will get terminals on them. One's going to get a blade terminal and the other one's going to get a smaller loop terminal because it's going to connect to the switch. And the white one gets the blade terminal and it's going to connect to the white power cord that's coming out of the stator. And that will leave us with basically 4 wires that are not connected to anything yet. And so 2 of those are going to connect to the capacitor that you can kind of see sitting above my hands on the table. And the other 2 are going to connect to the switch. So here we're installing one of the loop terminals that goes to the switch, and then we're installing it on the switch. So the battery is going to die in like 2 minutes or so. So just so you'll understand, what we've got left again is the capacitor, which is going to have 2 leads connecting to it. And we're installing those last 2 wires on the switch itself. So all we need to do is install the switch in the base, install the capacitor in the base, and then put the cover on the bottom of the base. And that's really all there is for the motor. And this is where the battery died on my camera. Luckily, I went and got something to eat, and when I came back, I went ahead and changed that battery out anyway. So we do have this footage, which is me just testing the motor. So I've plugged it in, I've got it turned off, and now I'm just going to turn it on. We'll let it run, make sure it's not overheating, check it for spark. And then when we turn it off, we'll listen for the click, and everything ran perfectly with this motor. So that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please forgive me for losing a lot of the footage. I apologize. A lot of moving parts here. Anyways, please like and subscribe. We will continue with the assembly in the next video, and I will see you next time.